Hello, welcome back to video 9 of our series. And I'm going to jump into another advanced topic in this particular video and talk about domain controllers, Windows Microsoft sites and services or subnets, and how we can interface to those to discover the information, pull the data back into IPControl, and the ability to deploy sites and subnets as they're being managed through the container structure. So one of the things that we provide is a domain controller setup and configuration, and I've gone through and defined mine. So I have my Windows 2016, so you know 2016, 2019, 2022. Your username, I'm using administrator. Now you typically might have a principal that you would set up for these types of remote access, and I would recommend doing so, but keep in mind at sites and subnets you would need that level of administration. So I use administrator and I've got my password. Now I'm going to use the executive agent, but also know that we have a Windows agent that can be on the domain controller, installed on the domain controller to do this action locally and then feed it back to the executive. And it can also be used to collect or manage DHCP or DNS. So if you have a domain controller managing those services and you want to have an agent to interact with the configuration, you can deploy that agent and we can set it up to do this. I'm going to use my executive agent here. And from that particular point, then we have, and let me show you the container maintenance to understand what we're going to do next. So at every container level, there's a checkbox for MS site. So effectively, you could build out a sites and services or sites and subnets hierarchy to match a Windows deployment if you wanted to mirror your Active Directory deployment in IPAM. So as that choice will give you the ability to set up the domain controller, discover the sites and subnets, and it'll create those containers based on the site and then allocate those subnets to those local facilities. And you can also manually do this, or we can do it through the collection, which we're going to do in kind of an automated way to kind of discover, again, the subnets and data, which we might then use to format or to manipulate somehow or change around entirely. I mean, just depending on how you end up doing this from a deployment perspective. So just as an option. So what I'm going to do here, though, because I just tried this and I didn't like the way it looked in that one area because it didn't fit. And I had some subnets that didn't fit out there as well, which I hope I'll capture in this particular video. So the first thing I want to do is under my organization A, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to create a child container just for my purposes. And I'm going to say, this is dev priv AD forest. And I'm just going to mount it like that there. And let's refresh it. Okay, and this will then become the mounting point, if you will, for those container blocks. And I better just go ahead and set these up here. So it would just be the actual use blocks. We'll use public in there. We won't do any root, and we'll use it to go back and look at the private block because it's just going to pull subnets down to this point. So this is somewhat going to violate, I think, my. No, we're not. We're going to do this a little bit different here. So this will be a private, and then we'll do public here. Okay. And this then, we're going to just tell this to be the region. So this will become the new regional aggregate, if you will, for the sites. Now, I have the subnets already there, so I'm going to go ahead and define those. And let's do the aggregate. And actually, I'm just going to leave this wide open for now. Apologies for this. Because I don't know how this is going to respond. So let's just do this for now. And then I'm going to probably change that and then come back and discover it again. And this is wherein if if we don't know how that's going to work, you might want to take a snapshot, do something before we get to this point and have to delete things in bulk. But I didn't see it to be too bad. All right, so now we have our domain controller. Let's go up and do configuration deployment. And this first time I want to do controller discover, specify my controller, and then I want this to mount all of these containers for the Active Directory for us under this dev priv, which is my domain. And we're going to say under this for us, and we'll tell it to run submit. Now this task, we should get some maybe errors with complete with errors or something if we're unable to complete all the tasks. And that's what I expected here. So what it's done is it pulled in the data that it could, and I had a number of sites already pre-configured, a number of subnets are already there. And as you'll see, it kind of went through here. But now when I get down to a range, and here's like my V6, where I didn't have any V6 blocks allocated, and I didn't set up anything with V6 yet, so it's going to give me the error. And I'm okay with that for now. And this particular block, you can't allocate it because it's already allocated. We had it elsewhere. But this is the default subnet. So I'm just going to leave that there, and I can expect it to see that. But if I go back now and I look at my environment, I'm now going to see the various sites, their subnets, and then I can go in and do the discovery again of the addresses, or I can turn on the DNS listener functionality to start capturing the domains from the domain controllers through the DNS listener. And that then would give you a tremendous amount of power to be able to do that discovery, pull in the data, and then allow us to help you format it and get it into its locational places that you can begin to manage it. Okay, so we pulled in a lot of data there. I'm going to just kind of leave that as is. I think that's fine. I'm not going to go back and do anything with the V6 yet, but we're going to touch on that probably at some point as we move forward. So that's one way to do this. Now, I'm going to have and say that there's some caution you should take when you're doing this configuration, and that if you do a config, it can and will if you have the agent locally. So this will require that the agent is on that domain controller in order for you to overwrite whatever's in that site services or add to it. And that requires a local config. So there is a somewhat security check there. I'm using this only for its discover capabilities from the initial point, so that I can compare what's there and what's in our system, and then we can compare what's different, and then start to reconcile any of those differences until we have a complete picture of everybody's networks and subnets. And that is, in the end, our goal with IPControl and the management.